This is a video recording of the System Design Nightclub we have every Wednesday in our Discord channel. This week we were lucky enough to be joined by a staff engineer from OpenAI who talked us through his approach for designing the newly released Pokemon card trading platform. Unfortunately, we don't have the Discord chat recorded, but there's still a lot of great insight in this session. Enjoy.
Yep. So basically, there's a lot of different requirements that somebody can get into with it. The two ones that I'm really interested in how they're doing it is how they did packs, how they did packs, how they did matchmaking, and how do they model the data. Yeah, who's actually played the game so far? I'm actually really curious. Oh, holy shit, there's a lot of people here. Oh, wow. Oh, good Lord. Well, hello, everybody. I'm the latest system design nerd. I'm at OpenAI. Pretty stoked about that. bit of a geek. But my partner, who will be a guest star every now and then, is smarter than me at this. So, yep, and also X straight bit, but she was a level above me. Yeah, yeah. These are our dinner time conversations.
It's a large dinner.
Yeah, it's a Christmas dinner. Yeah. So a lot of this is going to be based off of so for some context, if people don't know, Pokemon is a game that I think debuted in 1996. The physical trading cards debuted in 1997. They have grown wildly popular. It is now about a $90 billion brand, and one of the most iconic and recognizable brands on the planet. 90 billion is a lot of money. It represents a whole fraction of Japan's GDP, like an entire percent. It's nuts. But so when looking at how we're going to be making some decisions regarding how we're going to handle availability and latency and fault tolerance, we're going to actually be looking at this with brand in mind. Because, well, how do you get people to spend money on a digital image? Well, we tried that with NFTs, and well, we're not looking to do NFTs again. Nobody cares about that. I don't think that's an interesting problem. I'm sure they don't either. Why? Which is why they didn't do it. So essentially, it's a slimmed down game where I start off typically with something ambiguous. I try to find what are the primitives for it's what are the core objects for it. So there's cards, users or players, decks, collections, matches, and packs as the core entities. So a user has a collection of cards, which they can assemble into a deck and take to a match, and they got that from opening packs. So that's kind of how we logically structure it. Because we're essentially going to be going from the user back. Is that logic making sense to everybody? Yeah. Yep. It's actually interesting. To meet EU regulations, they actually have to list the rarity for them, and this is where it's going to get really fun with assembling the packs themselves in the pack service. Rarest is what that is a 500,000th of a percent. Most common is 3%. So how do we dynamically pull that or assemble that? So then some of the more rare cards are going to be have more common variants too. So we're going to be keeping track of a lot of variants of cards as well too. So something's going to have the same name, but have an extremely rare one that could be extremely valuable, and one really common one that everybody has. Yep. So it's just matched with looks like soonest one. So kind of a similar matchmaking strategy to Uber with drivers, but we're taking the proximity out of it. But we are still going to have the same underlying problem of we don't want to double book a driver. Well, but see, this is where the fun part of the discussion comes in. So do we want to use WebSockets or long polling for this? Because it's a turn-based game, so we're keeping track of the state of it. where there's going to be a winner and people are going to take turns and all of that fun jazz with a set of rules. So, how are we going to manage each match with it? There's going to be people in different availability zones with it. So, how are we going to coordinate and set up those matches to make sure that it is a smooth, even experience for everybody? Because brand value is top of mind. That is exactly where this turns into a fun problem. I have no idea. I was thinking we could essentially use maybe a hash value that's generated with it. We could use that as a sharding or partitioning key for a card database because there's going to be some that are more common than others and some that are more rare. We could also use that to direct to the right CDN as well with it. So like we can literally pull from the ID with it, and also we can also keep it more organized. So like for example, Pikachu. Pikachu's probably gonna have like 9 cards right off the bat. One of them is gonna be really rare. One of them is gonna be very common, but it's still all gonna be Pikachu. So how do we? So like just from an organizational perspective, like how do we store this in the? How do we model the data for the database essentially? Like, or Cloudflare uses lava lamps. Cloudflare uses computer vision and lava lamps because the fluid dynamics of that is nearly impossible to predict at that scale. Because I think they have like a wall of like 50 of them. Yep.
One question I had was, what's the importance of, because that number 0.005% is so small. I feel like
that's
there's
what they
a
had to
chance.
publicly list.
Yeah. So there's a chance that, it would never get picked, or it would get, picked 3 times in one day, and that might be, I guess, outside of our deviation that we want to allow. So one idea that I was thinking through was, what if we split the cards into ones that are more common, that are okay to be sourced by a real, just normal random number generator, and another pool of cards that are so rare that we want to control the tolerances on the variant, on the statistical variance of how often they get picked. And you could put all those super rare cards into a pool, and then your random number generator would be, 1 in every 1,000 times pull from the pool. When the pool gets empty, you refill it with the right proportions. Then you would have more control over the randomness to not oversample or undersample a card in a particular period of time.
So, yeah, no, go ahead. I don't want to step on your toes because I'm probably looking at it from a different end, another randomness part. Yeah, like it's been a month and there's already been 1 billion packs opened.
Yeah, I think that the scale makes the problem go away potentially. If it was
Well,
a lower scale, though, I think
one thing I was thinking of from maybe like a financial engineering perspective is we could so I try not to keep stuff in the same database, or I try not to like shard a database when it's unnecessary to do so with it, but over time we are going to essentially scale this to a lot more cards and a lot more players. So the rarity of a card, like, do we really need to scan through something that's like really rare? Like, we could put like I guarantee you a really rare card, because of its rarity and based off of user behavior, is going to be shown off more with it. So we basically maybe like with a fan out problem, keep that into like keep the image replicated more for faster load times with it, and like to have like a common database with it in a like really rare database. But then we have the problem of joins. Right now, roughly about like 300. Because we're probably gonna get upwards of like probably 10,000 by the end of the year or end of next year. Like I have no idea how many Pokemon cards there are. I imagine that there's probably gonna be a lot. I don't know. Like this turns into a really interesting one because of the scale.
So there's over 200,000 unique Pokemon cards.
Right now,
Not in the game, just in like actual trading cards. There's over 200,000. So I
holy
assume at
shit.
some point that gets ported over to the game.
Or actually opposite. Basically, we're going to want to have them replicated fast because so many people are going to like have access to them, load it up on different devices. Whereas like if only like 10 people have access to this, that is not very expensive. Like why replicate that across a CDN versus just pulling it directly? Largely just because now we're keeping track of it, and I guarantee statistically, a person that has a very rare card probably spent money to get that very rare card. So we're definitely like, all of a sudden, if there's an image not found, the whole illusion of you own this card is broken. So, like when we're keeping brand in mind with it, like we're gonna definitely want that fault tolerance. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. So I'm thinking about doing a non-relational database and specifically using Cassandra for this. I'm thinking about so just because just the level of fault tolerance that it has, and also it's gonna auto scale very well just through Gossip protocol with it. So like it's gonna auto balance the amount of nodes with it because we are gonna have traffic that is gonna be somewhat predictable, somewhat unpredictable with it. We're not gonna want to manage or scale that on its own. We just need it to always be working. That is the biggest sale point to me for it. And also, I frankly haven't worked with the only two like non-relational databases I've worked with are three: Dynamo, Cassandra, and Mongo. And I'm not using Dynamo. Yeah, because like we are dealing with like a wide column storage with it, but like because like so like for instance, because we're operating mostly off of variants with it, so like Pikachu, the same example again, Pikachu 9 cards, but like one title, one thing, 9 variants with it. That's not really a lot of data to kind of fetch with it anyways. So like I think in an unstructured format with it, like like max somebody has all 300 cards. Cool. We're fetching that and number of it. So like I think from the right side of it, updating the like frequency and the count of how many somebody has in a collection, so duplicates, would not be hard. Because I have a personal beef and vendetta against Amazon. Anybody laughing about that? I personally do.
I mean that's fair, but
Yeah.
then why not something like MongoDB?
Largely, so all of Stripe uses MongoDB. 1% of the world's GDP last year flew through Stripe. There's so much under the hood that we had to modify and customize in order to support all the use cases. With that one, I really don't think it's the best amount to engineer the effort into the same exact thing. With it, like I think there's more interesting features to put like the engineering time. Yeah, and I really don't like how like they're like really trying to push you towards like Atlas stuff like that. So like I do like Cassandra's like modeling a bit more for licensing with it, but like that is one thing for Appeal to think about from the business side is you're gonna have a lot easier time finding candidates who do have experience in Mongo or deep experience in it, whereas Cassandra is going to be significantly harder to find. Yeah, so basically I'm expected to work with multiple teams and like lead an entire initiative end to end. So like networking team, security team, product team, market team, if it's product facing sales team, et cetera, et cetera. So like a lot of different people. You end up writing more and spending more time in meetings and sitting down as a dedicated IC. So basically how you make decisions and how you think about like I'm for instance you will hear this name a lot. There is a competitor to Kafka called Pulsar. I love Pulsar. If I get a chance to work with Pulsar, do it. But it is really, Kafka has a huge ecosystem. There's a lot of people that know Kafka. I don't know how many people even here have ever heard of Pulsar. So like when I'm hiring or expanding the team, or somebody leaves, or layoff happens because some random private equity firm bought it, or some random investor is like, hey, lay off 14% of your staff. You don't want this black box there, but like you're also going to want to modify some stuff, because like now all of a sudden you're at a Stripe situation where it's like, oh, we're the biggest user on the planet of this. We now have use cases that we have such corner of corner cases that we need our own dedicated team in-house to modify this.
Someone
like
asked if Pulsar is a competitor to Kafka. Harry answered it.
Yes. So biggest off the bat, does everybody know SQS versus Kafka? Yeah, simplest right off the bat one. Like, well, I mean, just in terms of just like very, 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 very high level, it's just SQS is going to have retries out of the box.
You're doing message-based acknowledgement versus offset-based acknowledgement, right?
Yep, and if there is some sort of failure in the consumer side, there's going to be a retry versus Kafka. You got to like build that in. Yep. So it's like, do you want a dead letter queue? How do you want to handle this stuff? Like it kind of goes into a lot with it. But one really cool thing about Pulsar is it has Lambda functions baked into it. So for instance, because we have a large number of users in a pack service that's generating some randomness, I imagine that's going to take a decent amount of compute to assemble those packs. And we're basically just going to have like huge spikes. So new pack drops, we're probably going to have like 1 million people all opening a pack at the or requesting a pack at the exact same time. But there's going to be people who don't have one available, like to open up. And so do we want to add them into the queue to like get to the end and just nope, not authorized with it? Or do we want to optimize for speed and prevent them from getting into it in the first place? Yeah, and like so when you get to like staff level, it starts to turn into like you got to like you're being interviewed because you know a core piece of technology, or you know one area really, really, really well, and you go really, really, really deep in it. So for instance, I know a crap ton about caching, a lot about it. Like that is my bread and butter. So like
If I could
my
quickly,
system design interviews, like 30 minutes of it are just going to go into the caching patterns, why I'm doing something this way, and that's it.
I was going to quickly chime in here with a quick opinion. Thinking of it from the user perspective, I don't think they should technically even make it to the queue, because like you shouldn't be able to even access anything to like potentially open a pack. Like it should just be like if you've opened, this is the way I'm thinking about it, and probably how it's implemented. I haven't played the game, but like if you opened your 2 packs, like that ability should be like disabled until the timer behind the scenes resets, right? So I think in terms of like having that job go to the queue and then like coming back with like a, you know, invalid response or something, like disabling, I don't even know if it would make sense for it to even get to the queue, because like then that would make it seem like the user would have like attempted to open a pack.
Yeah, and so this is the part of it that gets really difficult with it, is there's a cooldown. So you can technically open up a pack every 12 hours. So how, from the server side, are we going to keep track of that time? Yes, and that's how you basically overwrite the amount of time. So like instead of like 12 hours, now all of a sudden, boom, direct access to it. Which is why I was thinking maybe like a priority queue.
Well, would you want to intertwine purchase packs from the free packs?
No, because like I really don't see a point in that, and also I could see that more from a legal liability, having them separate with it, because if somebody could potentially modify it to like, oh, just spend more money, you get better stuff, and like this is already a really controversial topic with a lot of legislation around it, and like because it's all ages, like you don't want to introduce kids into gambling. You already are. You are going to get huge fines from a lot of companies, and because the wide age range for Pokemon, you really, really, really don't want they're like an 8-year-old comes home, hey, I really want to get into this. My friends told me about it, and like as a parent, like it's like, oh, I don't want my kid gambling. So like we actually do have to consider that how we're going to comply with like all the laws around this, and thinking from the user side, not just deciding it from random. I'm thinking, how is this going to make the user happy for a $90 billion brand? Oh, every day, because there's so many laws involving movement of money that you have to comply with. So, like anti-money laundering legislation. Basically, there's certain like purchases that are risk. There's a whole lot of risk involved, and it's not a perfect system for money movement with it. So somebody is fronting the money with it and moving it around. And well, this turns into the whole classic problem of you want the last right to the database. So if I'm transferring $5 to somebody, how do you do that? You got to deduct $5 from somebody's account. You got to add $5 to somebody's account. But there's a whole lot of people in the middle of that. You don't want to be on the hook and as the middleman, you don't want to be on the hook for $5 when you're like now handling 1% of the world's GDP. Like, so publicly, I think I'd say like we handled like roughly $1 trillion last year. And like there's a whole lot, like India has some really complicated laws when it comes to purchasing. We actually had to replicate our entire database of every transaction and replicate it over in India in order to comply with their legislation to just stay in India. Yeah. Amazon, Stripe, DoorDash, Stripe, actually really funny. I worked on a product at Stripe where basically there are certain sign-offs for who somebody can get kicked off of Stripe and who can't, because somebody accidentally kicked DoorDash off of Stripe. Well, it was a really big deal for us because well, we make money through every purchase. I'm willing to bet they are already. I know Nintendo is. So I wouldn't be shocked. Oof. I consider it gambling because it does incentivize somebody to go towards the just human behavior. It does incentivize people to go more towards the paid end of it, but somebody can still participate without paying for anything. And over time, so it's a really interesting business strategy. So start it off free, get and as low as cost as possible. So you only have like a handful of super users who are really motivated to collect everything and have the disposable income to do it. But as you add more cards, and then it becomes harder to get in now because like you need some card from some old set, and now everything isn't as valuable anymore. Like, now you have a cap of having to wait 12 hours like per every 5, so like max 10 a day with that. And now when people have like 200,000 unique cards with it, like it's gonna take you forever to catch up. So like, yeah, just take out your credit card. Like, yeah, I think EA got in quite a bit of trouble with this FIFA
Yeah.
recently, in the EU and US. Oh, really?
Yeah, the boxes in it were very heavily controversial for like skins and things like that.
Yeah, because those can get stupid valuable. Oh, interesting. This would be a really similar problem for randomness. For like, how do you assign randomness for a digital asset like this? Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's why I was saying that this is probably the most fun question I've had, because you could easily spend like a year on one requirement.
Oh my god.
I mean, hey, somebody wants a like really great way to make a side. Definitely host your servers outside of the United States. And don't use Stripe. They will boot you off almost immediately, and like they will report you to the feds. FYI. So find a different way to accept payments. I don't need to tell you that because it's on the website. You have to agree to it. So that's not a secret. Yeah, like they're very blunt about it because Wells Fargo will yell at us. So yeah, there's a lot of stakeholders, and in that case, a lot of money on the line because you're literally dealing with money. But like when you give a brand reputation that you have to, and they think about too with it, that's also where it gets kind of fun. So like let's go into the game aspect of it and the actual match aspect of it. So turn-based with certain rules. You have 20 cards to a deck. Really not concerned too much with the shuffling aspect of it and randomness. You start off with 5 cards. Each one plays a card. Not too concerned with the attributes with it, but there's going to be certain types of advantages, certain rules. How do we want to keep this as elastic as possible with it? So auto scale when there's a huge spike in traffic, take it down when there's not, because we have either two choices with this being live. We have either long polling or WebSockets. I bet 40% of users are going to open up a new pack within an hour of them being introduced. That's a really good question, and this is where it gets hard. If we're thinking about this as brand in mind, what is an acceptable latency and what can we kind of hide behind it? So when you currently open up a pack, there's some like really cute animations and stuff, and well, that's probably just really just some smoke and mirrors to make sure that like people aren't noticing that, oh, you're just pulling random stuff and writing this to their collection and adding this entity to their profile with it, and this is the amount of time that it takes. So we probably want some SLA of around 5 seconds. 5 seconds to 15 seconds. Let's do 15 seconds. Yeah, this is what I was looking to talk about with it. We can have multiple consumers for this one, but yeah, the bottleneck is definitely going to be Kafka for this one. I don't know. I'm open to suggestions with this. This is out of my wheelhouse. But do they gracefully fail, or like is it interesting? And they probably have the same legal requirements to the refunds and chargebacks regarding digital goods with it. So, huh? I knew that there was a portion of this. Yeah, let's not even touch refunds, because like that does make sense, especially when we're looking at the time perspective for this one, because you don't want users to essentially exploit that to try to get access to a free pack sooner than allowed. So keeping track of the actual timestamp is going to be really important for this. But I don't think I'd keep that in the database with it. I think I'd probably set like a 12-hour expiration policy and a lock separate with it, and then just like use the like just player ID or like user ID as the key with that, because like I think keeping that in the same database as everything else, like you just kind of an astronomical amount of like reads. I don't think it's worth it. Whereas like yeah, Redis is going to support like 100,000 writes like per second with it, and we could probably have a backup in S3 or like some sort of like maintain some sort of persistence with a backup. But like Redis is going to be my go-to with it, just because like okay, cool, we need to reset this every 12 hours. It's very simple. Yeah, or React. Actually, I think React would work a bit better. Redis, probably one of my favorite products, just because you can use this as a Bloom filter, you can use this as a lock, you can use this as a cache, you can use this as a simple key value store in a distributed way, you can use it as a message broker, all in one thing. You don't need 9 different components, you could just use Redis. So there's a joke in my household, when in doubt, use more Redis. So, oh, in what way? I'm kind of curious. Oh yeah. Because you actually can do that within a transaction Redis. Yep. So like I was thinking, because like you're already gonna have to set an expiration policy for this. I think we can just set this to 12 hours. Then just do like a simple like read through, like can person open up pack? Well, are they in the database? Well, I mean, are they in this Redis cluster or Redis node? Yes, cool. They can open it. They can go through. We can use this kind of like as a gatekeeper with it because Redis can handle that amount of reads and writes. Man, very carefully. Hold on, my headphones died. Yeah. So basically, how are we going to maintain persistence? Yeah. So we can just keep kind of like a rough kind of backup copy into a database or dump it into an S3 bucket with it if we do want to hold on to anything for archival purposes, but that's like altogether pretty rare with it. And so if there is some sort of a shutdown of a component with it, we can repopulate the cache very quickly with it. There is going to be a bit of a cold start, obviously, but like you're not doing it for like you're using this because it can support a lot of reads and writes. You're not really focusing on the cold start problem. So like that is a trade-off that's worth making, in my opinion. Like, does that make sense to everybody? Like, yeah, and just a really simple like CSV, like nothing wild or complicated. Because like we don't need to hold on to every single day. We can just delete it at a periodic basis on a cron job. Really simple. Yeah, so if one of the Redis clusters goes down, now all of a sudden, because this is time-based with it, everything is out of sync because we do want to maintain the time and reset server side. We do not want to hand that off to the user because the user can simply just change their clocks or they can hop on a flight to Japan and now all of a sudden they're in a different time zone and going backwards in time, and time zones are a pain in the ass to deal with, and especially when you have a distributed system used all around the world with multiple availability zones, you're going to want a source of truth for time. And time's already very complex, and I really don't want to go into like using a matrix clock versus a vector clock in it because like that gets way over my head. Not at all time. Like we could just have it to essentially just like, hey, dump the latest value for like basically a lambda to essentially like delete the last CSV from it because like we really don't need to keep track of it with it, like because hey, the exact state of every user's time and at this specific interval with it, like there's really not a ton of value in that because we only care about the last write. That's it. We only care about reading the last write.
Two questions. One, do you, when the Redis goes down and while you're reloading it, are you reloading into a hot standby to make that process go faster, or do you fall back to database reads in that case? Could that make a load spike on the database? And two, you mentioned multi-region. Would these be localized to the region that the user made their last pack open from, or would you be like cross-syncing?
So I think it would actually be based off. So this is why I was thinking about using React over it. If a lot of people here have probably never heard of React, another thing that is also very loved in my household. React is written in Erlang. Erlang was specifically developed because if anybody's ever had to make an emergency call to like say 911 in the United States, I hope nobody has, but eventually like a lot of telecom providers were having a lot of trouble keeping track of that, so they needed to focus on huge fault tolerance while also have a centralized system with very good replication with that supported an amazing amount of concurrency with it. So some of the essential, so because now all of a sudden there's a big incentive back in I think the 80s or 90s where like, hey, no, you can't have calls dropping for 911. You now have to keep this logged and saved with this. Like, we're not accepting it. That's how Erlang was born out of AT&T or Bell Labs at the time. So React is a It is a key value database that operates just like Redis, but it is going to have that fault tolerance built into it, where it's absolutely critical. I don't think it is critical with it, but it is going to support the regionality with it extremely well. One key design consideration I was thinking of for the collections with it is we could use, and you're going to know way more about this one. We could essentially just use a partition key based off of the user's geohash for this as a shard value with it, or shard key. Just because like we're going to be dealing with a massive replication problem already, and routing it becomes a big pain. So just managing that data, but like we're getting like 9 steps ahead of ourselves. We need to come back. So I'd love to hear Chris' thoughts on that. Thank you. Yeah, it was like a $10,000 fine. So like, you drop like 10 calls in like an hour or something, like you're dealing with a crap ton of money. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, every now and then a history book can help. Yeah, but I want to be mindful for time, and we've only covered one feature. Yeah, yeah, I told you that the craziest problem I think I've ever came across. If somebody gave this to me in a system design interview, I'd be like, "Do you not want me to get this job? Like, I can just hang up this call now." Like, yeah, your goal should never be. And I regret when I'm on a hiring committee and I'm interviewing somebody for a system design problem, and it's like design Bitly. I personally don't ask that because I don't really get much signal from stuff like that. And it's all about signal. So if you're making it to me for a system design interview, I'm already assuming that like you've already been screened through multiple technical rounds. So like that part of it's fine. Now I want to know how you think and how you communicate and how you talk. Are you pleasant? If there's a conflict of ideas, how are we going to debate them and bring them up? Or is this just going to be an absolute nightmare? I already assume that you know what you're doing technically because you passed all the screens to get there. So now I want to see how are you to work with. So your goal should not be, how well can I memorize and regurgitate these steps for a URL shortener like Bitly? Because that just shows that you can listen to a YouTube video and repeat back what was said. You can literally get a parrot to do that. It'd be really cool to work with a parrot, but it's not very valuable to work with a parrot. So your goal should be to look at a very ambiguous problem and be able to look at it from like, cool, I cannot find a single article about how this looks technically. I'm going to loosely define some SLAs. And this problem is not scoped out by anyone. How am I going to tackle this? And what are going to be the big key challenges? What are going to be the bottlenecks? How are you going to resolve it? Because then whether or not you've heard the problem before, you're going to know how to tackle it. So that's where you want to get to. So thank you. Yeah, and it becomes fun because like it's like cool. I was just bored playing a phone app, and it's like, oh, how did they do this? So like, you know, how many people here have read Designing Data Intensive Applications? Yeah, speak up. Like it's famous Red Warthog book.
Read it once, listened to it on audiobook on my commute in the last couple months.
There's a quote in the beginning of it that I absolutely love because it really puts everything into perspective. It is the internet is now so vast, and like we interact with it in such a way now that we almost like treat it like it's a natural resource, and we forget how many different components and how complicated a lot of these topics are. So like, yeah, I order a pizza on my phone. There's an entire engineering team that's making sure that like that gets here in time, nothing gets dropped, energy quality, I don't get ripped off. Like everything is really complicated, really hard. And looking at that and making a really good product where I go back to now when I want to order a pizza, I'm gonna always go to this app. That's what you want to go to. Well, I got to find out who I could have bitched to when I need a refund. So, joke's on you. Um, okay. So, how do you want to implement a turn-based rule system? Do we have any preferences towards WebSockets or long polling? Yeah, it's going to be significantly more chill. So, somebody has like a full minute to make a turn with it, and if not, they're booted off. So, it's not going to be like immediate with it. They can take their time, and like all you really need to keep track of is just the state of whose turn it is.
By booted out, you mean like their turn ends?
Or cancel the game. They're away from their phone.
Oh,
Close the
interesting.
game. Free up the
So
instance.
unrelated, but or somewhat related, but like in Hearthstone, if anyone here has played that, you kind of have like some timer. You don't I don't remember how long it is, but if you don't react or finish your turn, by the time the timer runs out, like the game doesn't end, it just goes back to the other person. So like if you're AFK, it's like they just continuously like keep going, and the timer shortens every single time, like the more AFK you are. So I don't
Oh,
know.
interesting.
I don't know how
I haven't played
Pokemon's.
around with it enough to see if it works that way, but I wouldn't be shocked since a lot of people get. I think it's the same company that produces it.
But that
They
game
produce another major
also,
game.
there is ELO in Hearthstone, so that's probably a reason why they went that way as well, versus just this non-ELO Pokemon style. So
Well, I mean, like this is modeled. I'd see like pretty similarly after like say like bullet chess.
yeah,
So we're essentially modeling it in the same way. Where I see this as more because we do want to have really good availability for matchmaking with it. We're essentially going to want to free up an instance or scale it up and down. So like this is more or less just going to be going to what's our load balancing strategy here, because working with live events is very hard. Yep, write them to a lock so you're not double booking somebody. That's it. I do. Yeah. Yeah, I'm very boring like that. But this is where it gets really fun is with the load balancing part of it. WebSockets or long polling and using a forum or a gossip. How are we going to distribute this out? Do we want to use like a hash ring to essentially provision and just like monitor a certain set of instances to keep the cost relatively predictable or the same? Or like, what's our SLA here? That's that's what that's what I'm unsure of because like and this would come back to it would be really nice to get some user data and as the game matures we're probably going to come back or at least I'm going to come back to this and probably update this because we're essentially being guided by user behavior. So there's going to be some people who are really playing this game because they want to play competitively, so they're going to be playing a lot of games. There's others who just really love the collecting feature of it. So you're going to have very, very, very different users with it. So are we going to want this fixed, or how scalable, or how elastic? We're going to want this. How are we going to evenly distribute loads? And because you have players from all around the world with it, how are we going to essentially write up or create this instance or this thread in a middle ground so it is very fast or at least as real time as possible? Yeah, it's a monster of a problem. I do. Yeah, like this is like one of the very few instances where like Zookeeper would actually like be kick ass for this. But then like I don't know, like I think a gossip protocol would work like super well for it, or same thing with like just doing some sort of like round robin for it. But then like because like what's the SLA where people are gonna give up? To my knowledge, there is not like once you're in the queue, there's no way to remove yourself from the queue. It will find you a match. Like there's no way for you to volunteer to get out of it. So that's why I'm thinking they are using something like Zookeeper with that because like spinning up and down a thread or an instance is going to be
well,
very annoying and you're going to be dealing with extremely spiky traffic.
so what would then happen? It's kind of crazy that you can't remove yourself from the queue, but you could technically
Well, that gives us a
bypass
clue about what kind of queue that they're using.
Yeah, but you could technically bypass that by hard closing the app or your phone. Technically, like what happens in that case?
It'll actually attempt to send you back to it, and just a message pops up. Do you want to return back to the current game? So that's why I'm suspecting that they're not using WebSockets. They're using long polling. Yep, it's just a random one. Like you have no choice of your opponent.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, so like that's what's really interesting because it gives us some insight into some of the architecture decisions that they made with it. So we know that they're not using WebSockets for it, and that like there's no way for somebody to voluntarily eject themselves out of the queue. So like,
Couldn't you eject yourself from the queue by using the same distributed lock you would do to prevent double booking? You could your message would be
nope,
durably in the queue, but
it's
if you said something in that Redis, you could say I'm not accepting games anymore.
I did not think about this one all the way through. Let's talk through how we model that, and why we pick one over the other. And if anybody, this is your first time having these conversations, like this is what's expected at this level is when you do have an ambiguous decision like that. Now you have there isn't a product manager, there is not a PM, there's not a TPM, there's nobody above you to make that call. You are now the one who has to make that call. So there's probably 4 different answers I can think of. Does anybody want to pipe up one and why? It's just any random person. Yeah. How can you eject yourself out of the queue with the same locking mechanism? So like basically what is going to be the, how are we going to manage the locking mechanism for matchmaking?
Yeah, and I think it kind of it fits well with prevent like the double adding to the queue. So just say you're in the queue, you force quit the app loses state locally. If you're not, have a status that you're in the queue remotely, when you open up the app again, you might be able to get in the queue again. So your double booking locking mechanism either is going to need to tell your app that you're still in the queue, or you're going to need to be allowed to be put in the queue twice, and it'll just ignore the second time.
Interesting. To make stuff a bit simpler with it, because a similar problem I can kind of think of is why this would be different from like WhatsApp is I don't use WhatsApp a lot, but I do use Discord more. You can't block people. So there's none of that. You're not picking who you're matched against. You have no way of interacting with another person with it besides just the set rules of the game. So like, I think we do have to kind of keep that in mind as well, but like, I don't really know. So I think that question is essentially when do we write to the lock and when do we free them from the lock? Like at what stage? When they're entered into the queue or as they exit? Yeah, and like it wouldn't even need to hold like a hard copy of that, kind of like the time aspect of it, because like, if like the queue goes down or something, okay, cool, everybody just hits rejoin again. Like people go, oh, I didn't find a match. Like not even that big of a deal. It'll close itself out in 2 minutes. So like we don't even need to worry about it.
I think thinking through the game experience, I think the SLA on matching of like obviously you're dependent on another player, but given that another player is there, matching them as quickly as possible is going to be the best for the players as well as the simplest for you, because the abandon rate is going to be lower if people get matched quickly, where if you take longer to match, it's kind of a spiral,
Yeah, that's
because
gonna
then
make
you
it
have
way
higher
more
abandon rates.
predictable. That's gonna make it way more predictable for how many servers we're gonna need at like any given time, or like at least give some predictability from like at least the financial perspective.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Like some just vague, like it's never going to be 100% right because like Amazon is phenomenally good at giving wild pricing. Oh, it would have to be. Yeah, because the amount of demand and people accessing at the exact same time with it is going to be absurd. Like we're going to have ridiculously spiky traffic with it. It's going to be a completely different problem than I mean, really similar at it's really similar at Netflix with it, where essentially like new releases are added to their own database and replicated more across a CDN with it. So exact same problem. Yeah. So I'm purely just going off of only add stuff to the queue when necessary with it and have it more restrictive and like basically not waste time on the consumer end of it. So like at least kind of gate it a little bit with it. And also here's kind of a fun one. I typically when I'm doing system design interviews or when I'm conducting one, I tell the candidate, hey, I'm not going to do I'm not going to come up with any sort of like rough estimates or back of the napkin numbers. Most of your interviewers won't care, largely just because general rule of thumb I follow, if it takes you more than 5 seconds to think of how many requests per second or whatever metric you're looking to use, it's just a lot. It's just very big. You're operating at a huge scale. It's not going to influence your designing decision in any way. Don't waste any time going back and forth and figuring out back of the napkin math. That doesn't give me any signal besides the fact that you can do basic arithmetic and that you have a calculator handy. So when you have 40, yeah. So when you have 45 minutes, don't do it. Don't spend two or 5 minutes of it. Spend more time on the requirements. Yeah, well, that's because like it's typically a very familiar app. This is very new, and I told you like this is the wildest one I've ever seen. Yeah, yeah. Like this is like how like we're doing this as peers with it, and not necessarily just like I know an answer and you're trying to tease it out of me because then it turns into like basically just like how well does the interviewer with it because like you know we're both neither one of us are thinking about how can we find an acceptable answer to pass this interview. We're thinking about how can we build something that's acceptable for the user.
One more question on the Kafka thing and the scaling up and scaling down to be able to handle that spiky load. I think Harry brought up the point of it being hard to scale down and like the merging partitions. So just say if your partitions are sized for peak load and then you're in a non-peak load, you're going to have less users per partition. So you're either going to need to potentially like match across partitions or something like that in a low user, sign up time of day. So what would you think about the alternative of something that using like SQS where the consumers don't have to think about partitions and you're effectively reading across, random partitions. You don't care what partition you pull your other user from. Does that help the scalability and more specifically, the match latency in a low throughput time of day?
Yeah, go ahead, please. I've talked way too much. Interesting. And yeah, I mean, AWS as a cloud provider is going to meet all of our requirements in general in terms of geolocation and, well, with Cassandra being like absolutely phenomenal at the replication aspect across availability zones. That's honestly one of the big key considerations with it. So yeah, I agree with you. I think keeping it in-house, or at least in data center, like within the AWS ecosystem with SQS is, yeah, I agree with that take.
Yeah, because then if you're just say you're running in 5 regions across the world, your zone for matching is within the same region. So you should always have a user joining.
Yep. I want to spend a decent amount of time for like just questions, like from the audience. So let's just wrap up one last topic of collections. So say somebody has 2,000 cards. How frequently are we going to want to read from the database from that to assemble it? Or should we just cache it and should we cache it on the user's device and use long polling for it? So basically, whenever there is a new update for it or changing state, that's when we make the pull. Let's talk some strategies because we're essentially having a lot of users, a lot of cards.
Could we use something like an event sourcing mechanism to keep app state in sync with server state and not require a bunch of reads? Because unless there's a new event, everything's the same as last time you saw it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that this is the easiest part of it. So it's like more or less just that strategy of like how frequently do we want to do reads and how frequently do we want to update it, and at most we're gonna have like potentially, or at the minimum average, let's say for the 2 packs a day kind of rule. Like we're not gonna even, for at max gonna need to update it twice.
Yeah, I think
So
just like the content of the reads, like if you've got 2,000 cards in your deck, your read should be there has been no changes since I last checked versus here's your 2,000 cards.
yep. So only doing so basically maybe like the on open pack like trigger to update that.
Yeah, if you had like if your database was set up in such a way that's kind of like a log of card additions and deletions from your deck, then you can, if the app gets wiped or something, you pull the current snapshot. But then you can say your last pack was at 9 p.m. yesterday. You open the app, because you might have the app on several devices. Your query is, have I added or deleted new cards since 9 p.m. yesterday?
Exactly, and because there's only certain combinations with it, if you're just updating quantity or count, you're not updating any asset, that you're just adding like one more to a duplicate of a Pikachu card. So like there really isn't anything to pull. You're just updating the count. That's it. You can sort them on the device. So like if there's basically if the state of whatever is stored locally on the device changes from what is stored on the server, send an event for refresh and update. So I think that's the best way to handle it. Yeah, I'm not an expert in that one. If there's somebody who's like really good at like mobile stuff, they want to chime in. I black box that stuff. That gets really hard. If there's anybody in the audience, that'd be really cool to like shoot your shot, like shine on.
Unfortunately, I'm not an AdMob, but I have worked with kind of Delta stuff. So what we've done is we have some sort of Delta tables instead to kind of pick up on those Delta events. And when there's a Delta event, we just update the entry. So it kind of like stores, hey, this is the exact field that's changed. And the difference in change is just all we're going to store. So we don't have to store all the information. So we don't have redundant information in the new table.
That makes a lot of sense.
Exactly, yeah, but more on a entry level. So like if a certain column or row was changed, we only store that certain column or row, kind of like with at the level of bits, but a much more higher level.
I never have. That's wild. Yeah, where can I read more about that? That's really cool.
Yeah, it's something commonly used in the ads infrastructure at Google.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Learn something new every day. Yeah, this has probably been let's flesh out the design and then just the arrows. Then just let's just spend like the last I don't know 5 minutes actually fleshing out the design. And then we can just use like the remaining time just for questions. Cool. So yeah, we just do the lock with SQS here. One one of the main reasons why I did allude to why I was thinking about using Pulsar is just from the cost perspective and cold start of the Lambda for checking the lock. But we're still going to fill our SLA with it. Pack gets opened and triggering an event, then we're probably going to have some collection DB right here. So while there's all the cute animations going on, we're essentially writing, open the pack, bring this back. So it's added to it, and we're pushing that essentially back to the user. But I'm going to make this arrow pretty. Yes. Yeah, I do.
So the exactly once processing though is on a FIFO queue, so you have to make a decision in queue provision time if you're doing FIFO or not, which then has like idempotency tokens and stuff like that. But if you're okay with at least once, then you could use a standard queue, which you wouldn't have to worry about scaling.
Yeah, and that's gonna remove a lot of headaches because I mean, there's obviously new features to add, and like right now there is a limited amount of images and assets in this. But when it gets much larger with it, then we're gonna have to start worrying about the compression and how we're going to efficiently store that. So for the asset with it as well too, when it's loaded up on a phone, we could just have it like trigger a blob store with it, or the CDN with it, because like we're not going to be updating new cards, but like we can kind of black box that for now. I think we all know how to add stuff to a CDN and like drop something into S3, and we kind of talked a little bit about just some of the key partitioning strategies with that and how we're going to manage and maintain variance. No, because like we're probably going to only add like a handful of cards like a month with it, so like that's going to be really easy to update with it. It's not going to be like say a different use case from Instagram with user generated stuff. So yeah.
I think we might still need that for
Yeah. For the time aspect of it.
for being able to open your 12.
Yeah, because like we
packs
want
every
to
12
add them
hours.
to the like basically if there's some 5-year-old who's just hitting the button open pack, we want to versus some big spender like Saudi prince who like actually has the money to do it. I'm actually not sure. I know the strategy for Pulsar and Kafka. Not too familiar with it with SQS.
Yeah, I would say we want to do our validation for authorization up and like TTL expiration before we put the message on the SQS queue.
See, that's why I was thinking of, and why I was leaning more towards Pulsar is because, like, one, how would you check that? How would you add that to the lock? Well, you need some sort of a Lambda. Well, now you have a cold start. Now, just that data round trip and transit is going to get extremely expensive. With it, we're just have it on one. You can handle it. Like you're going to save a metric ton of money with it. But also, it's like, well, the hiring decisions with it. I guarantee you, I'm probably the only Pulsar geek on this call. Lyft uses it a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say, unless you're using something like AWS Cognito to give scoped credentials back to a mobile app to put messages directly on the SQS service, you're going to have a service in front of it anyway, and that service can be the thing that checks the Redis TTL.
Yeah, then we can do the same thing again to just a different one for matchmaking. Add them to the queue with it. So just gonna black box this a little bit and
you had mentioned, just to go back to something you mentioned before, you had talked about, when they add new cards into the pack, you might get a swarm of players that, someone mentions on Reddit that there's a new card out, a bunch of people want to come get it. So I think that it's an interesting business decision of, do you want that swarm of players and like buzz on social media might give you more engagement, or do you want to do like just a drip campaign of one card every day or one card every 4 hours, that it's so constant
gonna
that
be
you
in
don't get
bursts.
spikes.
It's going to be in bursts. We're going to want the spikes. That's at least how they do stuff. I don't know why they do
free
it that way.
advertising, basically.
Yeah.
We'd rather put more load. Infrastructure needs to be solid enough to handle the spikes that we're doing with the free advertising.
Yeah. Oh, here's a fun one. So for the topic with it, for the matching queue, do we want to add their deck there with it for the matching service?
As in, do they have to pick which deck they're going to use before or after the match happens?
Before they enter it. So yeah, it actually makes more sense to just have that with the topic.
That's how it works in Hearthstone, and I believe the Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game I haven't played. I watched a couple of friends play it, but you basically choose your deck and then you enter the matchmaking.
Yeah, so the topic can just have deck ID with it. So user pulls that, selects it, and yeah. So I'm thinking when something is successfully matched, we're just going to essentially just do ID of this is what I'm picturing it written to the lock is game ID, then user ID. Or maybe do it as a tuple. I mean, it doesn't really matter too much. So then we just have multiple of those. And we'd also use this as a way to essentially provision this to the correct instance of it or see when one's going down with it. So we could introduce a little bit of observability into this aspect of it, which is why I was going more with some gossip with it. So Zookeeper would be awesome for it, but let's keep this simple for now. And we are spent an hour on the requirements. And if I don't know, if we do a vote or show of hands for hey, go back and update this and make this flushed out and written up. Because I'll do it. But yeah, I want to definitely spend a decent amount of time for just panel questions and let others get involved or let others shit on my decisions. Go for it. Yeah. For the game itself. Yeah, that's why I was thinking long pulling, just because we really just need to keep track of turn and card played for it. And it's just track of time. So that's why I was looking at long pulling versus WebSockets with it, because we're not going to need updates every second with it. We're just going to need it every single time there's a change.
So I guess Redis are local on the WebSocket node.
What?
The state, is that in another Redis cluster or local on the WebSocket node?
Oh god damn! I was really hoping nobody would ask me that. I was going with the long pulling solution just because I don't know. I don't work a lot with WebSockets. Does anybody know?
Is there even a reason to keep track of turn number here, though? I don't think we necessarily.
Yes, because we're going to want to make this as real as possible with it in a game. And while we can't have two people, it's just like tic-tac-toe. We just need to keep track of the state anyways. With it, two people can't operate at the same turn at the same time, because then we're gonna meet a whole bunch of race conditions. And we don't want that.
So you're saying if we were to store the last well-known state, right, that we would then persist for both users, couldn't we restore if they were disconnected and were rejoining?
Yes, and it actually does support that feature.
Okay. So, but we would still need the turn number to.
Yeah, so
we
could just essentially keep maybe a JSON log in memory.
Okay.
With it and just delete it. I don't know. Somebody could. They do have a few. I did look at the credits. They do have a few machine learning engineers, so I imagine they're doing something with that with the data lake. But
But couldn't we
knows?
infer whose turn it is based on the state rather than having to like arbitrarily keep like track of a turn number?
Yeah. Yep. And there's gonna always be 2 players. There's never gonna be more with it. So you can just do it even odd, like simple as that.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, because like this isn't like luckily we're not gonna have something like 40 players at the same time or like something like Fortnite. Um yeah, and I bet because this is the first rendition of the app, that's how they're doing it with that going simple with it. So I really support that decision from like a business side for just roll out and like I unless something like just based off of user adaptability with it, probably this is probably gonna be the peak time for it unless something new drops and then like traffic's gonna like start to get a bit more unpredictable, like if it's just more dead versus like more spikes. So yeah, like it makes more sense while you're still experimenting and collecting that user data to just never assume how users behave because they will always surprise you with it. So yeah, keeping it simple and keeping it modifiable, I think is the best one for it because there's no reporting mechanism right now. There's none of that. So like, and those are really complicated features to add. I did not think about the CSGO. That's like the exact same problem. Oh my god, yeah. Yeah, like this makes so much sense because I was reading that like a lot of game developers are getting poached by high frequency trading firms. And that makes so much sense now. Because like they actually have to deal with this. Oh my god, yeah. And they get so underpaid. Yeah, for I think Roblox pays stupidly well. I do know that one.
Well, they're also
Yeah.
public, which is completely unique to the game dev world. Like you've never had like a game go public per se, like Activision's public, but like CS, like Dota, yeah, but like
I
Dota
did
2
learn
isn't public.
I did learn the Pokemon Company, they don't have RSUs with it. They do profit sharing. So it's not
Explains the model.
uncommon for people to get a bonus annually of like 200% of their base. So if you get a call from the Pokemon Company, take it. You're probably gonna have a pretty chill life.
Everyone right now is going to apply to Pokemon.
I know,
Nintendo.
right? I'm like, this sounds super chill. Like, I'm tired of working 60 hours a week. I don't work 60 hours a week. Um, and I'm pretty scared about that one. We didn't even tackle how we're going to handle randomness.
I feel like we got a couple more sessions in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We could just do like try to stump us, like try to ask something so wild with it as a request, like just absolutely go nuts with it. Think of the weirdest thing you can. I will not do design Instagram, YouTube, anything boring like that. I will also not do your homework. But or design the AI in the Alien franchise. Or like, yeah, do something like from science fiction, like something like really weird, or like, yeah, or you can just do a classic one, because like that's kind of the fun part about system design and why they're my favorite interviews is because and why I only do those. My coding one is laughably simple, so people quit giving me those. It's so easy. But yeah, basically, like you can ask somebody for like there's different levels for it. So I would consider this a staff level one just because we very heavily discussed trade offs and we were looking at it from a user perspective, not performance perspective. That's ultimately what's going to matter when we're directly tying this back to revenue and SLAs.
Yeah.
Oh, what if a client is cheating? It's a fixed set of rules. I don't think that that's going to be, but I do suspect because they do have 2 machine learning engineers on staff with it. In the credits, at least, they at least have some. They're saving some of the stuff, so I guarantee you that like statistically, somebody's going to get really fun with it, and they're going to think it's something really unique. And yeah, oh my God, yeah, or like, you know, are you going to
Well,
actually like program
it,
in Passant?
it's 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 actually more complex because like in state, like they have like stockfish and those bots that can analyze the current state of the board and like come up with different permutations and highest probability moves. But like cool things about this
But
is that
like chess is, but chess has so many recorded games with that and such a big sample size with it. And like
yeah.
Stockfish is like probably one of my favorite open source projects. Like, you really want to look at something fun to get some inspiration from, just go to Stockfish.
Yeah,
Oh my God, you
but
will learn something new every single time.
the cool thing about here is that like you don't necessarily know what the player's deck is comprised of because it like like how many different variations could there be like just off of the 400 cards, like how many different decks can you build? I think it's like unless you could literally build something that sees the person's deck and like what their current hand is.
Well,
um
and that still wouldn't even give you an advantage for it.
No,
Like,
like you would have an insight of like what's the best thing that they could potentially play, but you don't necessarily know what they might play either. But I guess the same concept as chess in that case. But yeah, you would
yeah,
literally have
but
to see what their deck is made like comprised of.
yeah, and also it's like I can download Stockfish. Like, you can, I think you can operate stock. I think I was reading somewhere that somebody's like operating like a Stockfish off of a treadmill. So like it's become like really portable with it. Like, whereas like, you know, I just don't think that there's enough data, and like I really don't think anybody really has the time, or like, well, somebody somewhere with 60 million users is like gonna do something and collect data, but like I don't think that, because there's no ranking, because there's no elo, because there's like
Yep.
no big advantage to winning or losing with it, I really don't see the like incentive for the behavior. Oh God, that is a really good question. I'm not good at bot detection. You don't right now.
Their
Just because
elite
like
code
bots
ranking.
are, yeah, bots are getting really good, especially like RPA and computer vision right now. Like there's also coincidentally another really good distributed robot process automation project called Pulsar. Um, it's unfortunately a very common name, but it is awesome as well if you really want to learn a computer vision based RPA that can do like 100,000 purchases of Nike shoes at the same time. Exactly. It's like, well, that increase, well, but we're adding bot users to users, which executives like, which for our next fundraising round is going to increase the value of my RSUs. So I don't care. So bring on the bots. Yeah, like it's basically the big differentiator, the hardest thing to learn is knowing what's worth focusing your time and attention on versus a shotgun approach of focusing on everything. And that is mostly learned through mentorship, and why I'm partnering with just about as many of you as I can. Because it is really hard to find that, and this is why I really like this. So sweet. Oh my God, yeah. My big beef that I have with Amazon was a system design round. The guy asked me, "How do I design the Apple Watch, both the device and the system and the health monitoring, and fully HIPAA compliant?" And I'm just like, dude, I hate you. I wasted so much time. No, no, it's not. But they're really good at. I need an offer letter to have something about. But their RSU structure is also like really stupid, and like I'm actually really curious because they do have their famous like 5, 15, 40, and 40 with it. Like how many actually like get that full vest? Because I know one person who's been there for 8 years. Maybe I'll have them on as a guest. He's been on the EC2 team for that long. Oh man, I wonder how they're feeling about that decision now. Oh man, I've heard that
Yeah.
culture is just absolutely brutal too.
Well, there's also
There's some really interesting problems that they work on, but like,
I mean, also come January 2nd or whatnot, it's getting banned in the US, so there's going to be a lot of unemployed TikTokers.
oh, somebody's an EC2 person.
But
Does somebody want to
kinda-
speak up?
I was going to say tangentially
I would
on
really
the
love that.
hacking. It's actually an interesting thing because as far as I know, for like CS:GO or like Steam as a platform, the way to like truly prevent hacking, they actually need to have like some pretty invasive software running in the background on your machine. Yeah, yeah. S-
Yeah,
and
fun story. I actually have a beef with the platform HackerRank because I found an exploit to their proctoring software by like reading at the OS level.
so
Well, they were just like, "How did you do it?" And I'm like, "Well, pay me." And they're like, "No," and I'm like, "I'm not telling you how I did
you
it."
you're saying you got around there,
Yes. Yep.
you're
So
about to
where
get
you could
you're about
read,
to get
copy, and
so
paste
many
off the
DMs.
screen and fire it off to an LLM because like I was like literally grinding leak code. I'm like, "Fuck this! A robot can do this better than me." How can I get around their proctor and make it look natural to the interviewer? That's how I spent my weekend. Oh no, leave it up because I want them to pay me. Well, I did. They were just like, no. And I'm just like, well, this is breaking it. This is breaking your platform. But then they're like, well, tell us. We want to know how. I'm like, but then I lose all my leverage. And I'm just not going to share it because I don't want to get sued by them. Yeah, I will. So either you will never. Basically, if you ask me in a year from now and I go, I don't know what you're talking about, it means that they paid me and signed, and I had to sign an NDA. But I found this one in 2022. They still have not paid me. I still have a beef with them. I still get things from their security team. Pay me. Anybody ever watches this from the hacker rank. I spent my weekend because of your stupid interviews. I demand to be compensated. Yeah, big lesson. Never work for free, guys. Yeah, I told you guys like this is probably my like favorite problem I think I've ever worked on because this has so many parts to it and like yeah, like let's really find something like for like the next one, let's really find something really unknown, preferably please no IoT. I really don't know any IoT. But yeah, I think a flight tracker could be fun. Oh wow, oh, that's so cool.
He's the one I mentioned to you, Denver. That's cracked on leak code.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Oh,
Yeah,
that kid
yeah.
is probably like from birth, like immediately. Wow, good lord. Yeah, yeah. Here's some little inspiration for anybody who's like really grinding leak code and hating it. I'm really bad at leak code. I've only ever passed coding interviews out of luck, and hence why Stripe and OpenAI they don't ask leak code questions. Netflix does not either. Hence why you see a pattern on my resume of non-leak code companies. Um, but yeah, basically, when you start your career as an intern or your first coding interviews, you get like fairly easy, maybe medium questions, and then when you like mature in your career, you start to get more harder questions and like more variance. And then when you get back to staff and above, they go back to the like, intern level questions because like you know, and I do too. Some they don't care about that. They care about like, hey, we have like 60 million users, and we need to achieve profitability in 2 years. And you have a track record for it. Like that's what they care about. So they'll actually ask you to redo interviews, and like they'll tell you the question and turn it into a take-home assignment. Or I know somebody from OpenAI who got fired after 6 months, who got an offer from Meta without an interview in under 24 hours. He is a genius. Weirdest guy I've ever met. Because I asked him, somebody passed on a number because like it was pretty much just I needed to find a way or just some sort of resource on monitoring a lot of GPU clusters for distributed training. And they're like, just ask this guy. And they sent me a number. And I said, fuck it, why not? I can't find any other resources. Texted this dude, just how do I do this? And gave me the best, most detailed answer possible. And I'm just amazed and then sit back and think like, how do you not ask who is this? Why are you asking this? Like, no, I just showed up just like on site, just nope, this is how we're doing this. That's amazing. Oh my God. The first thing I ask is like, who are you? How'd you get my number? Why? Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to. This is the first time in my life that I've had nothing to do for like a month. So like bring it on. My partner even mentioned today, like, hey, you seem like in a better mood because well, I hopped on the server yesterday and did an impromptu session. I'm in a better mood. This makes everybody happy. So, and also, last kind of thing about that one. When I got into engineering, it used to be really easy to find somebody who was really experienced with it, willing to mentor others, just because there wasn't too many people like looking to spend their free time learning this stuff. And so you had people who are really passionate about it, and now it's become harder and rarer to learn. So unless you're like lucky enough to be at a company that does have skip level mentorship, you're not going to have that. And well, I think it's really valuable, and I didn't have that, and I had to reach out and I had to find people with it. So like, I want to offer that to just about anybody who I can while I have time. So please feel free. Yep. And just talking to them, I've used other competitors way better. Like, we actually care about your career, your well-being. We align with your goals, and we actually enjoy this stuff. And that's what's important. Yep. Awesome. Is there another room I can jump on? I can answer like questions for another like 15 minutes, and I gotta get food. I'm door dashing Japanese.
Yeah, you can probably stay in here. Harry's
Oh,
probably gonna
okay,
hop off.
cool. Yeah, I'm just gonna sit another time for like 10 minutes. Then
Yeah.
like call tonight. Just to answer questions. So cool. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
everyone.
think I gave you the distributed load balancer and autoscaler.